So 990 SATs, true story?
True story, and I took it twice. So that's my combined.
That's your combined.
Yeah, so neither time did I actually score that high. Both were lower, but when you put the best math and my best verbal together, that's when you get the 990.
Are you kidding me? So you don't even really have a 990?
Extra embarrassing. Nope. If they hadn't let me take it twice, I would have had, I don't know, like a 960 or 970, something
I feel a lot better because I'm not going to tell you what mine were because you would probably leave the room right now, but mine were even lower. And so you and I give both people, and I retested too. And so you and I give people hope who maybe weren't the greatest students in the world.
That's literally, people think that it's embarrassing for me to admit that, but the truth is that is exactly what I want. I'm already at the punchline of my life, right? It works out okay for me.
Right.
So it's like, I want people to know it really does not matter where you start. The whole question that life is going to ask you is, where do you want to go and what's the price you're willing to pay to get there?
Were you, I completely agree with that too, obviously. Were you like this young? So I know you didn't have the best SAT scores in the world, but I've been around you enough now. I consider you a freak, which is a compliment coming from a guy like me.
No, I take it as
I think
such.
you know what I mean.
Yeah,
You're uniquely driven and wired to pursue greatness and to make an impact, no pun intended, in the world at a level that most people have not yet realized they're capable of, even though they are.
Sure.
And so, did you know this young? If we went back and looked at this kid who grows up in Washington State, was there already these obvious insights and clues that you were going to turn into this guy? What were you like as a young guy?
No, there definitely were not clues. So when I was a kid, I didn't show any signs of promise, to be really fair. And my own mother, when I left for college, I almost chickened out. And I was like, I don't want to go. I want to just stay home. And she was like, no, you need to go. You need to go. Pushes me out of the nest. And then literally every day since, she's tried to claw me back. So one day, 3 or 4 years ago, I said to her, Mom, you were the one that kicked me out. I wouldn't have left if you hadn't pushed me. So why did you push me?
Yeah.
And she said, with no malice whatsoever, I just always assumed you were going to fail.
Oh my gosh.
And now she had never been always my biggest cheerleader, always rooting for me, telling me I could do it. But quietly, just inside, she was like, you didn't show any drive. So the one thing I will say is I was grandly ambitious. I always said, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Always, since the time I was a little kid. But I didn't have the drive to see it through. So I really, really was an empty dreamer when I was a kid. And it was learning to hate that in myself, if I'm completely honest.
Yes.
And to not allow myself to be an empty dreamer, to force myself to get the skills to actually execute against it, to not be in any way, shape, or form pacified by saying I'm going to do something, which is actually super dangerous. Most people just thinking about the fantasy of what they're going to do gives them some partial sense of, oh, I've done it. Whereas I stopped letting that be okay for me, which largely came down to embarrassment I felt around my wife working when I had no job. And that was the time, she was my fiance at the time, but that was when I really started to go, okay, you've made a lot of promises to this woman and you're not on a path to keep any of them. So when I meet my wife, part of what she's attracted to is I'm talking growth mindset, man. I'm like, I can do this. This is what I'm gonna do. My dreams, they're big. I went through this. I've learned from it. I know how to do this now. I got it. Trust me, come with me, kid.
Yeah.
You're gonna be rich one day. And literally, that's what I'm saying to her. And she's into it, ready to go for the fight, wants to be a part of it. My wife is a real slugger. And so we then are doing the back and forth because she started as my student at the film school and we fell in love, but she's in London and I'm in LA. And so we're having to do back and forth. And I find myself living in London. And now I want to ask her hand in marriage. And I know she's old school, so I need to go to her dad. And I go to her dad and I say, I want your blessing to ask your daughter to marry me. And in the nicest way possible, he says no. And my wife, Lisa, had always warned me, my dad's gonna quiz you. When I introduce you, my dad's gonna quiz you. Introduces me, he almost doesn't look at me, okay? No quizzing. Get to know him a little bit, no quizzing. Seems kind of disinterested. He'd ask me a question and then wouldn't even listen for the answer. But when I say I want your blessing, just starts going through all these questions. And the final question was, how do you plan to take care of my daughter? Because he was very successful.
Okay.
And he said, my daughter's become accustomed to a certain lifestyle. And how are you going to provide that for her? And I said, sir, I know what you see right now is a broke, unemployed kid. Wow. But I'm the most ambitious person you've ever met, and I will one day make your daughter rich. And he said, thank you, I hear that, I still don't want you to marry my daughter. Now, important to acknowledge, he's always been incredibly kind to me.
Yep.
He was just very clear that he did not want me to marry his daughter.
Man.
And so that was like, whoa, like the gauntlet has been laid down. I'm gonna rise up to this. And so in my soul, I'm like, I've got this, man. I'm gonna do this. I'm committed. There's no way I will not get rich now because I'm gonna take care of that woman. I'm gonna show him that I'm right. And then the next morning I lay in bed for 3 hours, maybe 4. And the day after that, 3-4 hours again. Why? Because it was cold. I didn't want to get up and put a sweatshirt on and literally walk the 8 paces. And so I would sweat it because she was working and my job was to make her lunch. And she would come home and we'd eat lunch together. And when we get to the punchline of what I'm like today, even I have a hard time believing that was really me. So then these 2 successful entrepreneurs walk into my class. And up to that point, I'd promised myself 2 things. So I grew up chubby in a morbidly obese family and with no money. And I said, one day I'm gonna be rich and one day I'm gonna have 6-pack abs. And that was my promise. And these guys walked in and they were rich and they had 6-pack abs. And they said, look, we're starting a technology company. Why don't you come be a copywriter? And I was like, absolutely. And it's one of those where people are like, what are you doing? Like you're leaving the secure job? For me, I was like, they're like unicorns to me.
Yeah.
They are literally the thing I'm looking for.
Yeah.
They are rich and they have 6-pack abs and they're gonna let me into their company.
Yeah.
And so their whole pitch was, look, man, this is a startup. You can have any job in this company you want. You just have to become the right person for the job. So it was a tech company. It was in this beautiful office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Every single person in that company had a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Pacific Ocean, except me. And they put me in the server room, which had no windows and a bunch of computers, all whirring and making noise. And I remember one of the guys was like, who's the kid in the server room? And so that's how I became known. I was the kid in the server room. I didn't know anything about business. I would bring my wife to visit me in the office, and I'm like, look how beautiful the office is, and this is where I'm at. You know, and like literally like those makeshift desks that are like really like a table that you would use on a picnic, but you've got computers stacked on it. That's where I worked all day.
I'm a monster believer that the way you change your identity is your associations. And so what you just described to me was this guy who's trying to find an identity for the better part of his life, right? I'm ambitious, but I'm not driven. Right? I break down barriers for 2 years, then I get a big ego. Then I do something great, then my ego gets smashed, right? Then I start, my mouth writes these big old checks to my father-in-law, I'm all fired up, then I sleep in bed all day long, right? But do you believe big time that identity is shaped by these associations in everybody's life?
100%.
Talk about that for a second.
So it's so aggressive and it's now getting repeated. So I fear trite words, but words become trite because they're so true that people repeat them until they lose their meaning. So you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's just true. But now it's become so common to say, and it's like every Instagram post, that I fear it's gonna lose its meaning. Who are you spending time with? Because if you're spending time with people like you, you're spending time with people like me, I'm raising you up, or I'm just not gonna spend time with you. So it's like now, if you get in a mix of people like that who are like, man, we'd love for you to raise up to this level. But if you don't, it's fine, but we're just not gonna spend time with you. All of a sudden, that desire to belong to something powerful that you can see is gonna lead you to your dreams. And I remember saying to my wife over and over and over, they are the surest path to my success. I don't know anything else. I just know if I can hang on to these guys, they're gonna make me better. And so that was through all the years of being embarrassed and developing actually massive anxiety, because I was always behind. I was always the dumbest person on the phone. I was always the dumbest person in the room. And it was like, was I gonna be willing to emotionally go through that to get great? And most people can't. So here's the thing. Now imagine, I'm not the only person they said, hey, this is a startup. You can have any job you want. I saw 12 people, maybe more, come and go over the years. They just couldn't emotionally deal with it. And so I remember thinking to myself, why is it that I'm able to do this? And the answer was I could self-soothe faster than anyone else. So I would get kicked in the face and I would do something really dumb. I'd be called an idiot, told how stupid I was. And then I'd just be like, all right, I need to recenter. And that just became my obsession. I need to be able to emotionally get back to complete neutral so fast that you don't even see it register on my face.
How'd you do it? How do you do that?
Literally practicing. So remember, the same time I'm reading about the brain, voraciously, I'm reading about people that understand human behavior. I'm getting into cognitive science, neuroscience, like really going into it. So I'm reading all this stuff going, whoa, we're just a chemical processing plant. There are physiological hooks into these chemicals. So, hey, if you're mad, scared, whatever, but you force yourself to laugh out loud, you will change your neurochemical state. And you literally, your experience is the neurochemistry. So I was like, whoa. So I could be in a situation where I'm being berated or I legitimately mess up and it costs money and it's like, whoa, that's on me and it is nobody's bad but my own. And I realized that what most people do, their strategy is to deflect it. It's your fault, it's not my fault.
Yes.
So I started thinking of this as a metaphor. People are throwing gold at me. They're throwing it really hard, and I can put a shield up and deflect it, but then I lose that piece of gold. If I drop my shield and just take the pain, let it hit me in the head, then I bend down and go, this thing, which was me being stupid, there's a lesson here. And now I have this piece of gold. What I know is it's gonna hurt, it's gonna sting.
Yep.
But if I can emotionally recenter so fast you don't even see that I went through something, now I can just process, how do I take this information you've given me and get better?